Good evening, Dr. Zakaria, Madam Rajalakshmi.
Good evening, Atulji.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. I am Ramanathan from
Yeah.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Good evening,
Nanda
Art.
sir, Nanda sir, our national president, Mr. Atul Shah has joined.
Hi, good evening, sir. Nice to meet
Good
you.
evening, Atul Shah, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Nanda. All eager to hear you. Madam Aarti, we've chatted a few times, but first time seeing you live.
Yes, we've been always on WhatsApp Connect.
Right.
So I think
It's
it
one
is
of the-
time to start now. Let others join by the time we complete the introductory part. Shall we start, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Respected National President Sri Atul Shah, dear NC members, chapter chairpersons, our keynote speaker today, Ms. Nanda Rakinchad, Madam Rajalakshmi, chairperson, ISTD Chennai chapter, ISTD members and well-wishers, a very warm welcome to each one of you to this thought-provoking webinar on leadership lessons, putting people first. This is the 5th edition of the ISTD South webinar series. This webinar series is a platform for learning from the learned, a platform to interact with experience-rich people and learn from their wisdom. Today we have with us a veteran in the field of HR, very erudite Sri Nanda Rakinchad, former CHRO Tata Group companies. He is also strategic advisor and mentor in HR and business ethics. On behalf of everyone present here, I welcome you, sir, to this webinar.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have our National President Sri Atul Shah with us. As a matter of formality, I welcome you, sir. Welcome to this webinar.
Thank you.
We have Madam Rajalakshmi Subramaniam, Chairperson ISTD Chennai chapter, with us to moderate the session. In fact, she has been instrumental in bringing Sri Nanda today as the speaker, and I thank her for the same. And she is former Regional Vice President, South Region, and currently Chairperson of ISTD Chennai chapter. So on behalf of everyone, I welcome you, ma'am. I welcome all NC members,
Thank you, sir.
ISTD members, well-wishers to this 5th edition of the ISTD South webinar series. It is often said that leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of those in your charge. These timeless words by Simon Sinek beautifully capture the essence of what we are gathered here to explore today. In an era where agility, innovation, and disruption are the norm, one timeless principle still holds the center stage, that is people-first leadership. Behind every successful strategy, every resilient turnaround, and every inspiring vision, there are people. And the finest leaders are those who understand that leadership begins with empathy, trust, and inclusion. Consider Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. When he took over the reins in 2014, he initiated a cultural transformation, shifting Microsoft from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all organization. His secret, putting empathy at the core of leadership. That mindset not only rejuvenated the company's morale, but catapulted it into a new phase of innovation and relevance. As Nelson Mandela once said, it is better to lead from behind and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory. These are not just noble words, but actionable truths in boardrooms and beyond. Or take Indira Nooyi, former CEO of PepsiCo, who wrote letters to the parents of her senior executives to thank them for raising exceptional professionals. It was not just a gesture, it was a message: people matter and their lives outside work matter too. Today's discussion aims to distill such examples and philosophies into meaningful lessons that can shape more humane, inclusive, and effective leaders. Leaders who see people not just as resources, but as the purpose. We have a distinguished speaker with us today who brings profound insights from both corporate and real-world leadership experience. I'm certain his reflections will inspire us to relook at leadership through the lens of compassion, clarity, and character. Before we begin, let me leave you with a powerful thought by John C. Maxwell. He says, people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. Let us explore together how to become such leaders, those whom people believe in, follow with purpose, and remember with respect. I thank everyone for joining this evening with us to make this webinar a grand success. Before moving to Madam Rajalakshmi, I request our National President to say a few words. Then we'll move to Madam Rajalakshmi for moderating the session. Adusha sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Zakaria. The greatest part about all these programs is consistency. You started one. We were not very sure the second one would happen, but we are at numbers 5 now. 2, we started dot on time. It's not too often that we have 60 plus people who are on the dot starting at 7 p.m. So compliments to Dr. Zakaria, compliments again to Madam Raj Lakshmi and everybody here. We are all eager, in fact, edge of the seat on a leadership topic, waiting to hear Mr. Nanda. In fact, we were in Delhi and Dr. Zakaria and I were discussing about leading from the front or leading from the middle or leading from the back. It was an interesting debate as we were actually sitting in the car, taking different positions in the vehicle. And I still recollect long time back when I was heading the HRD cell in MPT, there was a quote that said that treat your customers as king, but make sure you treat your employees as the queen. Because if you don't treat them as the queen, they will never treat the customers as king. So people come first, and it's a very interesting mantra, and we are all eager to hear Nandaji. We thank the Chennai chapter for initiating it and Dr. Zakaria for his consistency, and we're looking out for interesting episodes in the future. Compliments and thank you for everybody for joining in on behalf of everybody in the country in ISTD. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. It is a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Now I request Madam Rajalakshmi Subramaniam to take over and moderate the session by starting it by introducing our speaker. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Zakaria. Special thanks to Zakaria for organizing such wonderful sessions. And today is the 5th series. Thanks, Mr. Zakaria, RVP South, and a special thanks to our National President, Mr. Atul Shah, for joining us today here. I'm sure your presence will make a lot of difference for us. And happy evening and welcome you all to this wonderful session of leadership lessons, putting people first. Mr. Nanda Rajkant is called as...
Our treasurer has also joined, just to make a mention of him.
Sure. I'm sorry, I was not aware. Welcome, Paniji, for the program. Mr. Nanda Rajkant, Nanda is shortly called as Mr. Nanda by all of us in the close circle, has over 40 years of diverse experience across manufacturing, trading, retail, FMCG, telecom, and service in India and in abroad. Holding a postgraduate degree in human resource and multiple executive certificates, he has primarily led the HR functions alongside roles in the manufacturing, procurement, corporate communication, and CSR. And I'm sure played a very major role on business ethics, which is needed one of the hour. Starting in 1985 with the Murugappa Group, he worked over 15 years, moving to Oman with OTE Group and later leading HR at Amar Raja and Dubai-based Landmark Group. In 2006, he had joined Tata Communication, formerly the VSNL, as the Senior VP CHRO, later moving to Tata Chemicals as a CHRO, and is Global Executive Committee member until his retirement in early 2024. He also served as a director and trustee for Tata CSR initiatives, and he's also played a very key role as a chief ethics counselor for 17 years. He had contributed significantly to business ethics across Tata companies, a life member of our ISTD Chennai chapter, NHRD and NIPM. He has presented himself in various industrial forums like CII, EFI, and leading large global teams driving organizational transformation. Currently, Mr. Nanda is based out of Bangalore, and he serves as an independent director and N&RC chair for an Indian specialty chemicals multinational. He provides strategic advisory in HR, business ethics, and CSR, and mentor future HR professional in academics. Not taking much time, over to you, Nanda. Welcoming you all, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, 1 minute. Is the screen visible?
No.
No, sir.
Okay, 1 minute. Yeah, it should be visible now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Has it come on full screen mode? Because I am still seeing it. And
No, it's not come out as full screen, sir.
You have to.
okay, now it must have.
Now it's okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
right.
sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, very happy evening to all of you, and nice to see a fair amount of people who have joined in. I think I can almost see 80 plus logins as of now. It's a great thing to do on a Saturday evening, that too, which I think talks tremendous volumes about the credibility that ISTD as a body has among the HR and training fraternity in the country. I think it's great work, and I'm happy to meet Mr. Atul Shah and other the National Committee members. And special thanks to both Rajalakshmi and Dr. Zakaria for facilitating this session. And I do hope that this will be the some opportunity to trigger some cross learnings, because I'm sure that I will also pick up some areas that will be of importance to us. I just only wanted to comment on, I think Dr. Zakaria mentioned that you can pick my brains, but I must say a word of caution that I always tell people that after my retirement that happened last year, you are only having the opportunity to pick whatever is remaining of my brain and not my brain. But I still think it is something very interesting to interact with such a wide body of HR and training professionals from across the country, and share with whatever has been our experience in terms of managing both business in the area of transformation, as well as the way the work the practices and the work practices have changed over time as generations have come in and gone. I just wanted to also acknowledge that whatever I have as my body of experience, to a large extent conditioned and shaped by many people with whom I worked with. And this starts right from my immediate managers with whom I've spent a lot of time with, a lot of my colleagues in the HR function, with teams that I've led across the companies that I've worked with, many line managers with whom I've had to work very closely, and some certain members of the board of companies in which I've been, who have provided me a lot of guidance and also questioned some of the approaches to make sure that finally we are doing something that is in overall good for the organization. So I would like to acknowledge the tremendous amount of support that all these people have given me in shaping me and my career going forward. So to begin with, I have a set of slides. I'm going to cover them through certain conversation and certain pointers. None of the slides are text heavy. They will just have a few words here and there just to capture the essence of what we are speaking. And we are going to be also facilitating certain question answers, which will then help us to address some of the concerns that you may have in your minds. To begin with, I think one of the things which I would like to start off by saying that, what we have been seeing in the last few decades has been that every company has attempted to make significant changes in the way they manage their business. But what is very important for us to keep in mind is that most of these companies are very happy to be where they are and with no intention to make a change, but that's not the reality. They are not acting in terms of making a change, but they're tremendously actually reacting. And why is this change happening? This change is happening because of a reaction to many things. It could be aggressive competition, change in market situation, regulation or deregulation, changes in the diversity of the workforce of the segment of the workforce, mergers and acquisitions that may cause changes in the way our companies operate, changing customer or escalating customer demands, change in technology can be a whole set of issues. So what this actually shows very clearly, I always use this as an example that if you were to take, we are all used to an era when we had telephone directories. So you go back to about 30 years back and look at those telephone directories. I know they always came with something called Yellow Pages, which was the business segment of the listings. I'm very sure that if you take any years or any city's telephone pair directory and go through them now, you'll find a large number of those companies which are very big in those days don't exist anymore. It is not that they were bad companies. They were absolutely great companies. They had tremendous customer equity, but they did not react in time to some of these changes that were happening. And that is why they don't exist anymore. So, I always have this opportunity of having worked with India's first in many fields. I worked in India's first fertilizer plant. I worked in India's first sugar plant, India's first sanitary ware plant, India's first confectionery plant, India's first soda ash plant, India's first table salt plant. So, and all these companies, are fairly old. In fact, when I was the Murugappa Group, one of the companies I was associated with celebrated bicentenary year. And it was such a landmark event for the company that there are very few companies world over which have reached that stage, and it has been a process of constant change and renewal. So, what does all this tell us? I think all this tells us that it is not necessarily the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but who do you think will survive? The survival can only happen by those who are willing to adapt, change, and collaborate. I think that is the reality. If companies are not willing to adapt, companies are not willing to change, companies are not willing to collaborate for the difference that has to create for the industry in which they are present, they will cease to exist. And that's a very strong message that I think the world has given us in terms of so many histories of companies that we have seen across. Large companies completely going under because they were neither able to adapt nor change or to collaborate. And that's I think, a biggest reality that we are going to see going forward. What is the workplace of the future going to look like? And this is something which, I try to create an image as to that we are all used to seeing workplace in a particular lens. But it's not far off. It's a matter of time. It may happen in certain sectors very soon. In certain sectors, it may take slightly longer. But the fact remains that the workplace of tomorrow will look very different from the workplace of today that we are all used to. And it is no longer going to be surprising to see robots or artificial machines actually occupying a significant portion of our workforce. We're already talking about agentic AI that will do many of the jobs that people are currently doing. So tomorrow, even meeting rooms may have even this own ISTD session that we are having may probably have certain agentic workforce also listening in and learning out of the thing going forward. And these are things that it's only a matter of time. It's going to probably happen. And as I said, in certain sectors, it will happen very quickly. In certain sectors, it may happen slightly slower, but it is definitely going to happen. That's a reality. So if you're going to look at, I'm going to start with also giving a few questions which I want to gauge in terms of, what does the audience feel? So do type in your answers in the chat window. Unfortunately, since I'm presenting, I'm unable to see the chat window live, but I will catch up with your comments in due course and then respond to them either during the session at the end or at a later date when we have an opportunity. So my first question to the audience is, describe in one word your current workplace culture. Whatever comes to your mind as the first top of the mind recall that you have, just type it into the question, into the chat window, and we will go through them later. Okay, I will continue. So putting people first, I looked at what is it that's critical. I'm not speaking to a bunch of people who are starting their career. You're all people who have had fairly wide experiences and you have had your own ways of dealing with issues that you have handled. So I'm not going to be prescriptive. I'm only going to talk about a few things that I have seen in my experience, and some of it has been conditioned and shaped by the organizations with whom I have been associated with. So hopefully these are examples that we would try to look forward as some broad meaning that emerges out of this for our learning and for our absorption. So in putting people first, I think the very first and foremost, I think, is that the answer lies in our function itself. It is always human before resource. And I think the more and more we are able to understand what is this human aspect before we treat people or the workforce as an expendable part of a resource, is going to make a big difference in the way we approach this entire subject of dealing with making organizations competitive through the use of people's strengths. And I think there are many examples that I have seen in my life where and I will rely a large portion on the Tata Group experience that I've had, where the fundamental principle has always been that you must treat people fairly and you must treat people in a just manner, whoever it is. It does not matter. It can be a shop floor employee, frontline field staff, even a contract third-party workforce, or maybe somebody at a senior leadership level, whoever it is. The fundamental belief is everybody should be treated fairly. And I've seen a lot of this actually panning out in terms of when my leaders go into organizations and have to create a difference in the way they run their business. I think the ethos of the group is so strong that anybody who tries to deviate will quickly find that there is a system that is putting them back on track, I think. And I can tell you clearly, when I started my relationship with Tata Group, it was the telecom business that I first began my experience with. And telecom in those days was an absolutely difficult environment because there was virtually no talent available in the country. So you had to go and get talent from almost any sector, from manufacturing, from fast-moving consumer goods, from consumer durables, from other service industry. Wherever we could get talent from, we had to bring them into this space, because the only two other players at that point of time was MTNL and BSNL, and they had limitation in terms of what sort of talent they could offer for the new companies that were coming in. And what was very interesting was that when you hired managers from multiple backgrounds, they all came with what they thought was good for them and what they have been used to. And Tata's has a very different way of looking at the way people have to be led or managed. And we actually found our biggest challenges was creating that culture. And to a large extent, we had to sometimes really play a very strong role at the leadership level, right from the MD and CEO and the board and the senior leadership team, in terms of shaping what sort of culture we were going to create for the future. And I can tell you many cases that we have had where good people, extremely good in their jobs, but had no skills of dealing with people. Or, they were dealing with them in a manner that was very different from what the Tatas wanted to create. And therefore, they had only two choices. Either they had to change their way of doing things and align to what the requirement was, or they had to find another job. In an era where you were still finding it tough to get talent, we had to let people go if they were not able to manage the way the teams had to be managed, the way the true Tata way of managing people. And this is the biggest lesson that I learned in terms of doing this and taking this hit on a business, even though it may mean short-term impact on the way you were shaping up or expanding your business footprint, but not losing sight of the fact that what is important. And it's giving the clear message down the organization that we will grow, and we will grow only in a way that we want to grow, taking care of our people. I think this is the very, very biggest learning that I had in terms of looking at the human before the resource. Now, also looking at the second thing important, I think, is when it comes into what I think when people see felt leadership. And when I say felt leadership, I'll give an example. If the company believes that safety is important, and if you have the leadership team walking around the plant, and then they find there are 5 motors or some moving equipment which doesn't have guards. Now, if you walk away from that point, from that location, without highlighting it and then making sure it is being addressed, even though you may have several programs to talk about safety, at that point of time, the people who are working in that area know that safety is only for the namesake.
So you've got muted, sir.
Yeah, okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah. So it becomes very important that people will realize that if the leaders were to stop there, prevent anything happening unless that issue was addressed and that unsafe situation was attended to, the message it sends right down the entire chain of command, right to the lowest supervisor and the person who's doing the work, is that it is very important. And this is not just important in discussion, it is something which will be very strongly felt by every single employee. And I can tell you, I moved from the telecom to the chemicals business, which is inherently very many hazardous processes. I don't know, it was a very unwritten law that any operator had the full freedom to stop a plant if he or she felt that anything that was happening was likely to cause any harm either to him, co-employees, community, or to the neighborhood. So this was a very a clear thing, and no questions would be asked. This is something which we had built in very, very strongly. And I can also tell you, we were we had a subsidiary which is Rallis, which is into insecticides, pesticides, and the plant protection chemicals. We took a very conscious call that we will get out of all red triangle products. And red triangle products in the pesticide industry meant products which were the most toxic. That's the definition of the red triangle if you see on the pack. So we took a very conscious call at the board saying we will phase out our presence in all red triangle products and go to only others which are far more environment friendly. It actually meant a very big impact on our process as well as our sort of capabilities that we had in manufacturing. But very clearly, the message it sent out very clearly to everybody was that company would do what is right, and it will only follow what we think is important for the employees, because the more and more you have employees exposed to manufacturing of toxic products, not only it is an impact for their health in the long term. I mean, apart from whatever we were making for the market and then creating a toxic environment in the way these products would get utilized, we realized that it is important for us to also make sure that we take care of the people's health involved in this manufacture of this product, to make sure that we are sending the right signal to our workforce. So I can keep giving many such examples in terms of what we have done, but I think the very important example that I had, especially when we were talking about very large-scale mergers and acquisitions that happened during my tenure there, I think one of the most interesting example I had was when I was in the Tata Communications, we acquired 2 organizations. One was Tyco Global Network, which is headquartered in Canada, one of the world's largest voice service provider, and another company called Tyco Global Network, which had the world's largest undersea cable network cable. And you not believe it, all these acquisitions happened within a space of hardly about 4 to 6 months. And this changed the character of the company. From being a very India-centric organization, we became a company which had almost some 40 plus nationalities on rolls. We were present in about 20 odd countries, physically having offices and presence. And there are very few companies that I know of which have become global in such a short span of time. So this meant, tremendous amount of change required in the way people are being managed. And we had, a lot of sensitization programs we had to create because Indian managers are very good at managing Indian workforce. But if you put them in charge of, global, I'm talking about almost 20 years back, today it's much different in terms of environment. People did not know how to manage global workforce, whether it is from very simple things of what type of questions to ask during hiring, what type of supervision to provide when they are at work. All this, were things that they had to learn. And I can tell you one very important element that we had to face was we had to make sure that there was a large amount of work that was happening in global locations shifting to India because only that made commercial sense. Otherwise, it was not going to be effective in terms of running the operations with so many splintered locations across and distributing costs or multiplying cost across so many locations. So this was a very conscious decision that was taken in terms of that we had to create an entire delivery organization sitting in India, which can service the entire global locations. But this actually meant about 700 odd people in global locations were going to actually lose their jobs because of this change. But I can tell you, this is where I really talk about the value of the Tata Group was no single person left in distress. It was a conversation that happened where people understood that, this is what is going to help the company in the long run. And I was very surprised when I had senior managers from some of these locations abroad coming to India, hiring their replacement, training them, knowing fully well that, in another 1 month, 2 months, 3 months down the line, it will be their own jobs that will get eliminated. But the amount of commitment that they had in terms of showing on what is relevant for the company and how it was managed came only because of the fact we said that, we will do it in a manner that will be extremely understood. And I can tell you, we have had occasions where even in Tata Chemicals, we exited businesses because we felt that, they were not businesses that we'll be able to scale, or we felt that it was going to create issues going in the long run. But every time we had to do that, no person was under distress. We gave them either opportunity to look at reskilling and moving into other businesses within the company, within the group, and even all of that failed. Only then we went in for an exit or a severance package, which was then made in such a manner that the impact on them was very, very minimal. So this is the way in which I think we really saw in terms of putting felt leadership, because leadership has to take the onus and make sure that you have opportunity to have continuous conversations, openness of creating, and every time this happened, the entire MD, CEO, and the leadership team would be physically present to address concerns and make sure that we were doing whatever was the best possible in that scenario to make sure this were being addressed. Sorry, the slide is moving now.
It's not moving, sir.
Yeah, that's what.
What?
Just 1 minute. I'll probably stop share and
Nanda,
come on.
what has happened? What has happened? Nanda?
Yes.
This is major. What has happened? Is this a disruption of the link?
No, the audio is very clear. 1 minute. I'll
Sorry?
just come back to that thing again.
No, already there. This was already there and it is existed.
Yeah, it is not moving. It is not
No,
moving.
the
That's
slide
why.
is not moving, Major. Just
Fine.
a couple of minutes, please.
Just 1
Okay,
second.
let him
Just
take
once.
in this couple of minutes. Allow me to say, I am happy that today I am also with you because of the very important day. We are talking about putting people first, being an army officer, and having today is the Kargil Vijay Divas. Very important day for us, for our people who have been in the uniform, and we always put the people first. Our Jawans are the first because they will say the bullet will hit me first. That is a kind of motivation, and that is a kind of leadership we give in the army and ensure that Kargil, many of you may be knowing, may not be knowing it, but it is again a tough task. We could go ahead because you had given me 2-3 times, and I'm happy Atul is also there, Zakaria is there, of course, as usual, Raji is very good. Nanda, I'm happy to speak to you because I was also lived in Oman for some times.
Oh, is it so?
At Muscat as well as Salalah.
Ah,
Where
okay, good.
Salalah had the TVS company's joint venture. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the screen is
I
now
think
moving, sir. Yeah.
what happened to be that clutch
Yeah.
which came up must have been removed. Go
Yeah.
ahead, please.
Okay, yeah, it's moving now. Yeah.
Thank you, Mehdi. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think the next point that I think is important when you look at putting people first is that inclusion by itself is not just anymore a fashionable term. And I think it is very, very incumbent on leadership to demonstrate this, both in action as well as in spirit, in terms of, do you have the right policies first? Do you have the right enabling mechanisms? And then make sure that, it is built over time. I can tell you, when I joined the chemicals industry, chemical industry by nature is an industry where very few women are there in the workforce. And it is just historical, you had very different plants at remote locations, or you had manufacturing processes which were very, very difficult for people to work. So it was very, very rare to find women in the chemical industry in those days. So when we started this work, one of the actions that we started off by saying was that we seem to be getting some numbers were coming in, but this pipeline is constantly leaking. It's not been something that you can keep building on. And we realized that the best way to do this was to make sure that we don't start with targets. We don't say that we should have X number of percentage of gender in the first 3 years, 5 years. We decided that we will reach the numbers. The numbers will come on its own, but let's focus on enabling mechanisms and make sure that those are mechanisms that we can build over time. And the first thing that we actually set out to do was saying that when we hire freshers, we will start with a norm that we should start to get at least 50% of fresh hires as women. How many stay, we will decide later, but at least first start this as a process. And I can tell you that when we started this first conversation, every plant manager, and we had about 7 plants in those time, all plant managers came back and said, we are happy to have this, but we need to hire more. And then we asked what for? And we said, no, the problem we have is that, no, we can't deploy these women in night shifts or beyond the general shift. That is the problem that we have, because all chemical plants are continuous process, and therefore we need round-the-clock operations. You not believe it, I then called the HR team separately and told them that their only KRA for that year was to make sure they get approvals for deploying women in night shifts across all the states. And I was so surprised that the first state where we got permission turned out to be Uttar Pradesh, which we never even thought was going to happen. We thought, some of the southern states will probably take the lead, but it was actually Uttar Pradesh that actually got first. And in a matter of about 8-9 months, every state in which we had operations got approvals. And after which, we were able to deploy women in all the shifts, and women were so happy being given line and operational role rather than being put in engineering office or in project office where they will only be looking at drawings and not actually managing teams. Then came the next challenge that we had. When I remember about, I think 2014 or so, I was in the plant, one of our oldest plants, along with the MD. And after we had finished the conversation with the new women who had joined. We were about to leave the room. One of the women employees came and told us a thing that, I actually avoid drinking water when I'm in the plant. So our first reaction was that maybe the water quality is not good, they require something to be done. So immediately we're looking at, what is the reason? And then we had a more detailed chat and she said, no, the reason we drink water, don't drink water is because the washrooms are so far away. And imagine this is a plant which is almost close to 100 years old. It was never designed to have women in the workflow in those days. And it was a reality that, women had to walk almost about more than a kilometer to reach the nearest washroom. And the plant is so, large and wide, it is not practical. So they wait for a lunch break or the time they will go only to use the washroom. And therefore, to prevent that, they were not drinking water. So this is the reality. You not believe it, we had to then get involved. As leadership team, we had to get involved and then make sure that washrooms were put up in every plant that was there and nobody had to walk more than 250 to 300 meters to access the nearest washroom. And this meant that, we had to change the entire layout in some places, create a facility for washrooms to be built in places where it was not originally envisaged. All this had to be done. But all this is only because we believe that inclusion is going to happen only when you make sure these enabling mechanisms are put in place. And we had a very, very poor success rate when we were going to campus for hiring women. We would go to the best of colleges, which had a large number of women in their peer students who were passing out, but success rate was very low in terms of what we would get converted into selection. So we changed the paradigm a bit. We said that every panel that goes to a campus will mandatorily have a lady manager in it. And with this one change, our success rate on campuses grew tremendously. We had a challenge that we did not have enough good lady managers to be sent on these interview panels initially. So I had to go and choose, request some of my fellow CHROs from other companies to lend me some lady managers from their companies so that we could go and put them as part of this panel. But what this showed very clearly was that if you start doing some of these enabling mechanisms, things will start changing. And I'm very happy to say that, after 7-8 years of consistent effort behind it, today we have a reasonable amount of people. We have the entire, in fact, Tata Salt is one of the most popular brands that we have. And the salt plant is almost entirely run by women, right from the managers to the engineers to the supervisors to the shop floor workmen are all run by women. This is one of the biggest things that we have been able to bring about in this remote location, because it's not, first of all, it's difficult to get people there, but after you get, to help them retain them is also a challenge. But we have been able to get this through consistent effort that has been put in place. I'm now coming to my next question for the audience. And this question is, again, I'm going to ask a few questions just to get your sense of things. So this question for you is that, in your opinion, in your current workplace, any traditional practice that you're following still seems to work or be relevant? Whatever is the practice that you're following, please capture it for our benefit and we can share with all of you in due course. Okay, let me go back to the main part of the session. This is a very important point that I have found in terms of putting people first, that, if people are not clear what purpose that they are performing, which is leading to the larger picture of what the organization is doing, they will not be fully involved and committed to what they are doing. And this is something which we actually found that the most fundamental, largest driver of any workforce engagement is actually the purpose that people have in their job. And many of our programs or many of our processes are so mundane that people feel that it is not contributing anything to the large picture. But if you actually break that down and then tell them, how is it what they are doing contributing to what their function is supposed to be doing? Secondly, how is it contributing to what the organization is doing? And how does it help the enterprise as a whole perform? I think then the engagement becomes much more clearer. So it's very important when we have actually found that, why do certain teams or certain managers have very good engagement score? with the teams who they manage, vis-a-vis those managers who find it a challenge dealing with their workforce, or they find that there is very low engagement. Very important element that comes out is that our managers spending time telling the teams what they're supposed to be doing for their own, in their own roles, which makes it benefit for the long term. Okay, this is the other important element which I found is very important when it comes to leadership, is that if you lose the trust of people, everything else gets lost. And it is very, very simple, because you may have the best of facilities, resources, you may have the best of policy documents, all that may be in place. But if there is lack of trust at an operating level between the people and their managers and their super managers, you are going to find it very, very difficult to create a great organization. And it is not easy. Let me tell you, there is so much of pressure of quarterly results and the performance. You have to do market sentiment, shareholders' price, market cap, to determine all of this, which may create so much of external pressure that you may lose time, lose the time that you have to focus on building trust in your teams. But if it is not done at the time when it has to be done, whatever you may think you may be able to compensate later does not create any benefit, because the effect is not there at that point of time when you put effort, because when you had to put, you had not put that effort that was necessary. And trust is a very, very important element that we have seen. And when I used to also handle the ethics function, we actually found that when managers trust their teams to behave in an ethical manner and support them in whenever they have ethical issues or dilemmas that they face, that team actually works to super level, puts in superlative efforts to make sure that they're doing outperforming the market or outperforming the peers in their particular industry in which they operate. And that's a very important element that we have actually seen take place. The next one, which I actually talk about, is, care goes beyond what is said in the HR policy handbook. We will have a lot of stuff that we talk about in HR policy. We talk about care and governance and everything. But what is not said and the way in which managers manifest it becomes very, very important in terms of how it has to be done. I remember I had an opportunity or experience of being in organizations where it was a practice that the GM of every division will send out a birthday card to all the employees in his function every morning, depending on whoever had birthdays that particular day. And this was a mechanical activity. There would managers would sign these cards. Some of them would sign it even in advance and leave it to the secretaries to send it out, not even physically knowing whose birthdays it was. So there was a very interesting situation that we once found, that one manager called one of his subordinates, something had gone wrong at work, and actually blew the top over him, and then really made his life miserable by putting him under very strong words being used and all that. And after all that was done, as he was leaving, the secretary came and told him today is also his birthday, and he very quickly called him back and said, I want to also wish you on your birthday. So I think this is a very classy example of how a great, let's say, HR policy is meant to help recognize people on their significant dates can actually be counterproductive. It does not manage properly. And this is something which we have actually found that, there is a lot of stuff that we have seen in the group. Tata Steel is one of the companies which has a great record in terms of, looking after employees in terms of their benefits. And they were one of the first companies in the group that introduced something called a Suraksha scheme for the contract workforce. And this, what it actually meant was that if any contract workforce were to either die or suffer a disablement, permanent disablement while at work, the family or the person, depending on death or disablement, would get whatever was the last drawn salary till the normal date of retirement. Suppose somebody had an accident at 40 and then passed away, the family would get paid till the person would have reached 58 or 60, whatever was the retirement age, even for a contract workforce. I mean, we have enough policies for regular workforce, but for a contract, this is something very rare which was introduced. So I remember I had just joined Tata Chemicals, and Tata Steel had just introduced this policy. So we were asked to review something similar for Tata Chemicals. So I made all this proposal, and we went to the board and we were presenting this. And it was, since it was very similar to the at Tata Steel, we didn't expect any questions to be asked. We knew it will get cleared and it will get approved. And Mr. Tata was the chairman then, and he looked at this thing and he said, "There's something odd about this." And we thought, why? How can it be odd? Because there's another company that has already done this, and we're just following that. So he asked a question. Suppose this person were to suffer an unfortunate event, and the family is being paid this amount today. You think this value of this amount is okay for the next 20 years? I can tell you, none of us were prepared for that question, because we all thought we were doing something very great. But that gentleman, in all his foresight, and the fact that, he wanted to really look at what is it, the message that you want to communicate, said that, see, we have to assume there's going to be inflation. And he then told us, you decide what is relevant, what is reasonable, but you build a factor of inflation and build it every 2 years. Whatever is amount will get increased by that amount every 2 years. And he said, you go ahead and implement it. I can tell you this was one of the most remarkable changes that we brought in. It was not there in any handbook. It was not there in any policy document. It was not even law in terms of providing this benefit of facility. But the very fact that somebody like him thought it is important and relevant and told us, please spend time on this to make sure we are addressing the issue and we're helping where it needs to be helped, was really good. We introduced this sometime in, I think, 2013 or 2014. And few years later, when we had the same COVID pandemic that came in, we had many similar death cases, even in the contract workforce that we had across. We extended the same benefit even for COVID cases. And it is one of those most touching moments that I had when we were able to call the dependents and, to give them the benefit and pass on the benefit to them. And this was structured very beautifully. I can tell you, I'll take a small example to tell you how we build the commitment. If there is a contract workforce, let's say in plant A that passed away, this benefit was being shared in one-third basis. So 1/3 is borne by the company, 1/3 is borne by all the management staff of that location above a particular level, and the other 1/3 is borne by the contractor. And this is how this investment in this annuity was being done, which will then provide a lump sum payout every month, and the value will change after 2 years to an enhanced value. But this entire purchase price of that policy would be met by this 1/3 contribution. And I remember when we had to introduce this policy, I wrote to all the managers by telling them, this is one policy which I hope we don't have a need to use. But when it happens, I'm happy that it will be able to help in the right way and bring some sustainable relief to this person who's really thing. And this is what I really talk about in terms of the group's focus on care beyond what is said in any statutory book or in any policy book. Like that, we have had many such cases. I still remember we had one case where we were hiring a lady employee, and everything was done. The offer letter was issued. It was about to be signed. And then she called back the hiring manager and said, I wanted to share with you, which I came to know only today. I know I'm to join in 10 days time, but I'm actually expecting. I didn't know about it when I came for the interview, but this is something which I came to know subsequently. I thought I must tell you before you have come to hear of it after I have joined the company. So even the hiring manager was confused, not knowing what to do. The hiring manager came to me and said, what do we do? I said, there's no problem at all. We are not going to change our decision because this person, I think, but let us make sure that we write to her first, and we'll write to her thanking her for bringing it to our notice. That, she did not keep it a secret. She made this disclosure. And in fact, I remember still enjoying writing that letter by telling her that, we only hired her but she brought a bonus of bringing a new person also along with her when she joins us. And that's something which she still shares, treasures that response that we gave as a company to her. And she came, she joined, she did a great job. And very happy that, we were able to support her when she had to go on a maternity leave a few months after she came on board. I can still tell you when we talk about care, we had been a very interesting conversation when we talk about the organization is going through a change because of different workforce segments coming in. We have new generation, the old generation, and no policy will be seen the same view by different workforce segments. So it's very important for us to look at how do we address concerns of all the segments to make sure that everybody knows that they're being taken care of. And when we first introduced something called paternity leave, this was just about 7-8 years back. We had only probably 20% of the workforce who would probably benefit from it, because others were all beyond that prime. They were not going to have any paternity leave requirement. So there was a lot of issues in terms of what will the people feel about it. But we said we are not going to say we will introduce a separate leave for dependent marriages for the parents. So any employee whose son or daughter was getting married would also get a special marriage leave because they were not eligible for paternity leave. No. And this is something which we then ensured that everybody saw this policy far more favorably than what we would have had if you looked at only in one segment. So these are things I think it is incumbent on HR teams to really look at what we can do in terms of making sure that we are able to address all the concerns that people have in their mind in the best possible manner. This is one of my favorite things that we talk about. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and it is very important for leadership to look at, use them appropriately, and more importantly, act thoughtfully. So you have to ensure that, there will be occasions when sometimes not speaking is better because you're able to give your time to somebody who has an issue, and then you listen to what that problem is, and then take decision and act thoughtfully subsequently. The person then feels, even if when it took time, they were able to act upon beautifully. I always used to tell this when one of the issues challenges we have in HR is sometimes how to say no. We obviously cannot say yes to everything. But I think it's not the issue of my experience has been, it's not the saying no. That's not the problem. It's the way you say no that's important. And we have to learn this art about how to say no most effectively. The person also goes back feeling that, he has still been heard. It was still something which was not done, but he is not unhappy about it not being done, but he knows that there's a reason why it could not happen. I think that's a very important skill that we need to develop. And I think this is very, very clear. Leadership sets the tone. In any organization, I think the way the rest of the organization will respond, react, or create always starts with the way the tone is set from the top. So if you're able to actually make sure that the leadership talks in one voice, is exhibiting the same values that you want the organization to reflect, is what you will actually find cascading down the organization. And wherever you find that there are loose connections, or sometimes it is not getting transmitted properly, leadership must not hesitate to take the right action. And I think if you shy away from taking that action, then whatever you want to say and whatever you want to implement will not be effective because of the fact that the signals are getting broken and it is not getting transmitted the same way it needs to be transmitted. Okay, I have my second last question for the audience, which again you can type in. As a HR professional, what is the biggest challenge you face in putting people first in your own organizations? If you were to decide to put people first, what is the biggest challenge that you are currently facing? Please type in and we will look at it later. So I'm going to now talk about some learnings and reflections that I have had across my tenure in various organizations. And these are purely my learnings and reflections. I'm not saying, you have to accept whatever I'm saying 100%, but just take it for what you say. And if you find merit in it, look at it. If you don't find merit, just ignore it. So my first learning is that, when it comes to dealing with, it is always good to be optimistic, but we should be mentally prepared to deal with the worst case scenario. And if you don't have that capability as leaders, you will actually find if something goes out of control or out of what you had assumed to happen, you will feel very paralyzed. You will not know how to deal with it. Whereas if you know that this is where I want it to happen, this is the most best case scenario, but I also know if something does not happen, how will I deal with it emotionally? How will I deal with it with my teams? What will be my response? I will be prepared for it. If I don't be prepared for it, I'll actually find that I'm unable to deal or respond to it. The next learning that I have is, we are in an organization, every context is unique. So if you assume that, we can always copy paste from one organization to another, any intervention and expect it to work, it is not going to work. I mean, forget about organization to organization. Even within the same organization, what worked 5 years back may not work today because of various factors that are in the change in the context. So it's very important for us to understand that context before we decide what intervention is most suitable for that particular context. This is one of my favorite slides that I have, and one of the things that we as HR people and we as managers tend to do is to do what? We tend to complicate things. But I think the most successful thing is aim for simplicity. Don't overcomplicate, whatever it is. I can tell you, we have written ethics manuals. In the conventional sense, they would be huge documents, running into several pages, chapters and all that. If you convert all of that into a very simple story and a question and answer form with a couple of scenarios, whatever you want to communicate in a 50-page document can be done in 5 pages, and people will remember it, understand it, and they know what is critical and continue to live with it because of how simple it has been communicated. That's a very important tool that we need to learn as leaders. This is a very important point that I have actually found is, there's always a toss between should you be people-oriented, should you be, profit-oriented. So this is a very dilemma, because every initiative means cost, or it means that you're going to have an impact on your bottom line in some way or the other. But my experience has been that while it is a delicate balancing act, in the long run, investment on people always pays off. You will never be at a loss in terms of how the organization succeeding just because you have invested on people, because that investment, even if it does not pay off at that point of time, will certainly pay off at a later date and make sure that you are still being more successful as an organization. Now, this is one very important thing that also I believe is that, no matter who you are and what you become, you will always have a boss. So there is no running away from it. So don't assume, that, when you will always be in a situation where sometime in your career or in your life, you will reach a stage where you don't need to have a boss. You can never be in that stage. Every time you think it is there, you will always need to have a boss. And I always use this. I think that even somebody like Mukesh Ambani, I think when he goes back home, we all know who his boss is when he gets back home. And this is another of my learnings that every organization has 3 types of people, 3 broad categories of people. And what are they? 2 categories are very easy to find out. The first type is they are definitely the part of the problem. So something is not happening, that they are part of the problem. The second type is they're willing to be part of the solution. So these 2 categories are fairly easy to find out, very easy to address. You can deal with them. The third category is the most difficult. They refuse to be in either of the above. And this is the most category that you have to be very watchful of. And I would only recommend if you can build the skill and capability of identifying who fits into this type 3 and deal with them first, put them in one of the boxes above, half your problems will get resolved. And that's something which I found as a very, very important element in terms of whenever I had challenges dealing with people, I first look at where do they fit in first, then deal with it, and then go ahead and decide what solution works for them. This is, I think, a very classic one that we are seeing today, that, is no longer it is a case of one size fits all. Everybody has the same challenge. But the way you will have to deal with it is not identical. You will have to contextualize based on what sort of specific circumstances that are there behind that particular individual before you decide to deal with that. This is another very important element that we look at. We all look at issues from the way it appears to us, sometimes completely forgetting the fact that the way the person sees from the other side is also true, but because we are not aware, we think it is not right. So get into common ground as quickly as possible, because unless you get that common ground, it's very difficult to decide how it has to be dealt with. I'm not sure whether this happened in the session today, because I couldn't see other than 4 or 5 windows that is visible to me. The rest of the windows is not visible, but I'm very sure that this did not happen. But the message I wanted to give is not so much of this, but the message I wanted to give is that as leaders, we should never close our eyes from anything that is obviously wrong or inappropriate. I think that's the ownership that we have as leaders of our organization and our teams that we manage, that we must be willing to stick our neck out and then deal with it. Because if you don't do it, then again, the message that you're giving is very different, and people then don't value that organization because they believe that, there are other factors that play, and you will not be willing to accommodate some of these wrong things, inappropriate things happening because it is considered okay. I'm sure that all of you are fans of Indian movies, and this is one of my famous slides, that it does not matter which language it is. It can be any language from Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, Telugu, Bhojpuri, Hindi, Gujarati, wherever it is. In any of these languages, the scenario is very common. There'll be just 30 seconds left for the bomb to blast. There's only one character who has that uncanny ability to go and pick the right wire and defuse the bomb. And at no marks for guessing who the character is. It's always, irrespective of what the language is, it's always only the hero. But the reason I'm putting this thing is not from this movie angle, but to tell you that sometimes when you come to people issues, they will look exactly like this. So complex, so intertwined, you'll not know what is to be done first, the thing. But if you're able to step back and make sure that you do analysis and pick the right wire, diffuse the right wire, you'll start getting the desired result. The quicker you develop that ability, the better is your chance of dealing with the problem. Otherwise, you will keep doing stuff and not find anything significant changing because the issue is still lying there. That particular issue has still not been, the right issue has still not been dealt with. My last question for the audience before I come to my closing slides. If you have to be more impactful as a HR professional, what is the one thing you want to change in the way you perform your role? So based on whatever I have shared with you over the last 1 hour, if there's something which you think you want to take away and you want to become a more impactful person as a HR person, what is that one thing you will change in the way you perform in your role? And to conclude, I'm going to give this very interesting thing. I'm going to show a set of pictures, and I want you to respond to it. And this is a very simple thing. I'm sure some of you would have already seen this earlier. I'm going to show you pictures and ask you what will happen if you boil these things for 5 minutes. So let's look at the first picture. If you were to boil this carrot for 5 minutes, I'm sure that many of you know the answer. It is going to become soft. The carrot will become soft. Now let's look at the second one. If you were to boil a set of eggs for 5 minutes, what was soft and gooey inside? Because you boiled it, will become hard. Now the third one is neither the carrot nor the egg. What happens if you boil the coffee bean? Now the very important thing that you will actually find is the coffee bean still remains a coffee bean, neither becomes hard or soft, but it changes the aroma of the water in which it was boiled. And to me, I think it's a very important metaphor that I use in all my conversations that I have with teams by saying, we are all here for a purpose. And we are all here for a purpose, either to make our teams perform well, to make our function do well, to make our organization do well. And to help us do this better, I think it's very important for us that this metaphor of a coffee bean defines the role that we perform in our day-to-day lives. So wherever we are, whichever organization we are attached to, whichever teams we are working with, whichever group or sector we are industry or we are playing with, I think if we are able to play the role of a coffee bean there, we will make the world a much better place, and we will find it a very, very interesting way in terms of way that we can take the organizations forward. So that's the last question, point I had to share with you. But thank you so much for being a great audience. And I've enjoyed this interaction with all of you. And I look forward to dealing with any questions or comments that you may have at the top of your mind and then deal with them. But if you do wish to reach out to me, my number and my email ID is available here. Feel free to write to me. I will certainly make sure that I respond to you if I know the answer. And if I don't know the answer, I'll at least help to point you the direction of somebody whom I feel can help you find an answer to that query that you may have. But thank you once again, and I'm open for any questions and conversation. I'll just stop the sharing so the screen is back in full view for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nanda, for such a wonderful, insightful session. I mean, people first philosophy truly stands best, not just as a policy, but I feel it's basically deeply lived in the culture. I'm seeing how inspiring and how valuing people translate into a long-term trust. That word trust matters a lot, and the impact it creates on employees. And I'm sure Tata is always in people first, and it reminds that every business success and human values go hand in hand. And I've first of my project with Tata was at Tata Marco Polo at Dharwad when I did a diagnostic study. And as you rightly said, for women, they were taking care of each and every aspect when they wanted to bring in women to a bus manufacturing, bodybuilding. So in our study, we were able to understand what has happened, what will. So the future thought process was also brought in. So I'm sure it was really wonderful having you here. In want of time, can we take one or two questions? Any questions, or can I go ahead with my question?
And if there are any questions we are unable to address, please drop them by an email to me. I will certainly respond to you.
Sure. That will be great. Any questions? Okay.
Yeah, I think one question has come up.
Yes. I think from Nitin, in era of ITES and ROI, people is most difficult aspect.
Yeah, Nitin, let me tell you that, this is a myth. And I can tell you that, I have worked in sectors that had very compelling performance pressures or, very highly competitive issues in the market. I can even share with you, when I joined Tata Chemicals, we were in the fertilizer business, and we had an outstanding of fertilizer subsidy payments due from the government, which is running to almost some 3,500 crore at any point of time. And that's roughly almost half the revenue of that particular business. And I can tell you, we never made sure that while we had a lot of pressures financially, it was very clear that we would not do anything which is short term that would impact our people or employees. And one of the fundamental issues that we always had, in fact, whenever we had was, it is always it's a tough call. It is not that it is easy to get budgets. For training or development, released during a tough financial situation. But I can tell you, if you go and explain why it is important to make sure that it is, this investment is to be done, because it is what is going to help when there is an upswing in the market at a later date, you will find that the board is supporting you. And you will always, but it is not easy. You must have your homework done right. You must be able to justify what you will do and look for areas where you can save, not look for areas where you should stop spending. So I used to always tell, and there's a very common thing, even when you have, let's say, CSR spends happening, there are years when, the business may be under tremendous stress, but we may not be able to, afford that CSR spend. But the philosophy of our boards have been very clear. Once you commit to a community, you can't withdraw. You can't tell the community, this week, this year, quarter, I will not do any medical services. It's not possible. You're in a situation where they need that particular help. So we would always look at, where you will, when you have to make a commitment on spend, make sure it is sustainable. And secondly, for whatever you're spending, get better bang for the buck. So I used to tell my teams that, I'm not at all worried about you spending, but I would want you to come back and tell me, for this same spend, what more can you get in return? If you're able to justify that, you should be able to spend more and make sure you're able to get better benefit out of what you're spending. So that's something which it's not easy. It's not a thing to be done. But it is something which we have to spend conscious effort to do it. There's one more question that has come, which is, how does Tata ensure the voice of grassroots employees is heard and leadership corridors? Now, whatever I'm going to share with you is based on my experience of working with two large companies, Tata Communication and in Tata Chemicals. We don't have something which is, I would say, standard across all Tata companies. So there may be different practices in other companies. But I can tell you, in both these companies that I have worked with, there is something that we call as Leadership Connect. And this Leadership Connect happens at 3 layers. There's one at the board level, there's one at the senior leadership level, and the third, which is at manager level. So to give an example, what do we say when it is the board level? Now the board members, it may not be all the entire board, but at least minimum 3 members of the board would actually spend half a day or so, sometimes over a dinner or over a meal, interacting with the people at the lowest end of the organization, either at the location or they're brought to a place, and having a freewheeling conversation with terms of what are their issues that they have, which is impacting them on their work. What do they see as their own future of the organization or their own careers? These conversations are all collected by the board members without any intervention by anybody else. And that's a way that they will come back and have a debrief session in terms of sharing with them what they will do. If you look at the senior leadership, which is the MD and the CXO team, we would have an open house session and skip level meetings at multiple frequency through the year, at both within the business, across businesses, and across locations. The third one is with the manager and the skip level for the teams. That will be with the respective function. It's probably only me as HR head would have the opportunity to go through multiple functions, but otherwise the CFO will deal with the finance team, the marketing head will deal with the marketing function, sales with the sales. That's the way it would be done. So all of these do plow in finally in terms of putting through a feedback conversation that we have. Plus, of course, most organizations have the annual or the quarterly engagement surveys, which also has open-ended feedback that you can collect at a very macro level and plow all of that into taking decisions which are meant for the next phase of the organization initiatives.
Sir, since we are running short of time, I will ask one very simple question which I felt to ask from your presentation. You were saying that Indian leaders are very good in dealing with Indian workforce, but they are not appropriate for the global workforce. What is the single best skill that they lack while handling?
No, I must paraphrase that I said this in the context of almost 20 years back.
Yeah, okay.
It is very different now because there's been far more exposure. But when India started globalizing, when Indian managers were put in charge of global teams, it was a big challenge that companies faced. But many people have overcome that. And there have been a lot of work that has happened by very good organizations, not just Tata's, but by many other companies, to make sure that there is a good sensitization program in place and making sure that managers are aware of how to deal with global workforce and global teams.
Okay, thank you, sir. One more
Sir,
thing.
one last question from my end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where in times of conflict between employee welfare and shareholder pressure, what would be the guiding principle should a leader follow in an organization?
See, I think very clearly, I think the way my experience has always been that never shy away from presenting to the board as a management team. If something is important, it may not be financially the most right thing to do at that point of time, but it is very critical from an employee engagement or from a long-term moral perspective. You must very clearly be willing to state it to the board. And I can tell you a very interesting thing, and this happened, when we had Mr. Nasli Wadia as the chairman of our NRC, and everybody knows that he's a very tough manager, in terms of way he would put you under pressure. And we had this very interesting situation where one business was under tremendous stress. They had made a huge loss. There was issues that, were so that it has never been faced in the business in the past. But he made this comment. He said, if we don't support our managers now and we penalize them for issues that have happened, they will never have the effort and ability to set it right, because they will think it is no point in doing it. He said the role of managers at the board at that time is to make sure that we communicate the fact that it is a tough year, but we also support the employees in what has happened. But we don't go about by just cutting increments and bonuses as the only route of doing things, because that is not sending the right signal. If somebody has done put in their effort, they have done everything that was necessary from their side, but circumstances beyond their control, they were not able to think, we should make sure that we are not penalizing them. That's the message that he gave us. And I'm very sure that this is something which many companies follow in terms of making sure that certain things, certain times happens at businesses like that, but we should not be short-sighted in our approach, but really look at what we can do in the what that message will do in the long term. Because when that situation then changes for the better, you will find a tremendous amount of effort that is being put even without asking for it. That's a message that you can really communicate. I don't know if I've answered your question, Rajalakshmi.
No, thanks. Yeah, very clear to the point.
Yeah.
Zakaria, can we close? I think questions are coming in. The questions can be sent to us. We will get it organized, or there's an email ID and the mobile number has been shared. You can also WhatsApp Mr. Nanda and we will be taking the answer.
Yeah.
Once again, thank you all. I think Saturday evening, having such a wonderful numbers, it's really a fantastic for us. And thanks to the speaker for being here. Should we have a group photo, Mr. Zakaria?
Yes, yes.
Can we switch on our cameras, please? Gurinder, can you support us on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Gurinder.
So meanwhile, I will conclude. So photo session will go on along with that. I know many questions are there, but due to time constraint, we cannot handle all the questions. It was a wonderful delivery of valuable experience from the side of Nanda sir. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your experience and taking your time and joining with us in this evening. And it was amazing that we had a pan-India crowd, including our national president, national treasurer, chapter chairperson, senior members, senior NC members, and heads of different V schools, my own colleagues and students, and our NC members and MC members from Chennai. So I thank everyone for joining and making this session very meaningful and fruitful. And of course, without Rajalakshmi ma'am, it would not have been possible to get Nanda sir and getting this session in this way, because I was getting a lot of messages in my WhatsApp appreciating the quality of the delivery done by Nanda sir. So I thank Rajalakshmi ma'am for arranging this particular edition of the webinar series. Thank you, ma'am. So once again, I thank you all and try to join for our next edition by next month. And Gurvinder is there, who is giving all support from the back end, hassle-free operation for our Zoom. Thank you, Gurvinder, for
Thank
the
you, sir.
wonderful. Thank you all. Have a nice time. Good night.